I'ma work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it. Work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it. Peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Hey, peace. Thanks for tuning in to the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. We're going to try a little bonus episode today. And what prompted this episode is last weekend, me and my younger brother, Squadrino Spence, we went to the Spyhouse on Broadway in Northeast Minneapolis to participate in a picket that was called by the Spyhouse Workers Union. They recently unionized workers at Spyhouse, and the ownership at Spyhouse is refusing to recognize the union. And last weekend, they pulled off what was, I think, the first service industry strike in the Twin Cities in a couple decades. Just a really powerful, inspiring event, and we were excited to be there. And on walking up to the picket line, we were reflecting on the role of that Spyhouse in Northeast Minneapolis, in kind of the gentrification of Northeast Minneapolis. It's a part of this development called the Broadway. And it's in the Beltrami neighborhood. This podcast, Money, Power, Land, Solidarity, we talk about gentrification. That's like one of the big themes of the podcast. And what does it mean for working class people, for brown and black people, for the multiracial working class in Minneapolis? So we wanted to see if we could talk about it on the mic. I got Spence with me.
What's up? What's going on?
Man, not too much. And the reason I brought Spence in is because he has an interesting perspective. Spence is a commercial painter and painted the 612 or the Broadway development. So basically, I just wanted to start with that, Spence. Like, could you talk about what that was like kind of describe what was your relationship to this development, the Broadway?
For sure. I will say that I wasn't part of the initial crew that really turned it over from like the abandoned mattress factory that it was. But I will shout out Don Superior Painting, all my homies, like Mike B and some other people, Colton, Donnie, Sam, all these people who grew up in Beltrami, turned it over all the way. It's owned by First and First, which is somebody who we paint for. We have a contract. We do like all the painting for First and First, which owns a bunch of properties in the Twin Cities. And I hear accounts of it being like a place of where people were sleeping. It was an abandoned mattress factory right there in the cut from the intersection of Broadway and Central. And it was a place where people could sleep.
That's what I remember about it, as far as like all of a sudden this being this new hip spot where you've seen the new paint jobs and the new design. I feel like that was one of the first high profile breweries. And then it was one of the moments where I realized, like, damn, I've been driving past that building my whole life and never even really, it was just another one of those kind of like post-industrial buildings or whatever, buildings that were either abandoned or real low profile, and yeah, poor people were making use of.
People were making use of it. That's what's interesting. And then just to see it now, the contrast is interesting.
Yeah. So like, do you remember what year it was?
What year were we living on Grand? Remember when we were on Grand and we were staying there? Mike was always coming from the Broadway.
I'm about to look it up right now because I feel like in my mind I want to say 2012. I'm about to look it up. What are some other properties that you painted for First and First? I feel like that's the other thing is like, wow, this was a word I learned recently is recapitalization. It's another way kind of to say gentrification. And it's the idea that people with money, people who want to invest and profit off of real estate, were targeting Northeast Minneapolis and targeting Minneapolis in general. And we were noticing it, realizing like, damn, one, this is coming off a hell of people getting foreclosed, really aggressive policing, and just everybody noticing Northeast Minneapolis changing. New businesses open up, new buildings going up, and feeling this like conflict about like the working class neighborhood that was and how people were getting squeezed. And then gentrification, like new people, new buildings just kind of popping up. So that's a long way to ask. Like I remember, what other buildings did you paint for them?
Right now, Northeast, currently, they're right by the golf course on 33rd, like in between like when you're going towards the Camden Bridge.
Yeah.
Over there, that's like it's an old school that's abandoned that First and First is redoing.
Back there by
It's
the
similar
big
because it's
train
abandoned.
yards and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. And that's dilapidated currently. But the Vandalia building, I don't know if any of the listeners are familiar with Vandalia and like University over there, but kind of in the cut between like from University and like Marshall over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Vandalia that I painted there for like 4 or 5, probably actually not like a whole year. Like I exclusively got paid by turning that building over, and we did all the build. And right now, if you go there, it's really hip. There's a couple inspiring quotes positioned on the walls, stuff hanging in cool, inspiring ways.
Hey, don't they have something in the Broadway that's like? I remember looking at some piece of like public art in there that was just felt like offensive. It was like "The world is yours" or like
No,
life
that's
is a playpen
the world
or
is
some
yours.
shit.
The world is yours is in the Aria, which First and First also owns, which is downtown First and First.
Yeah.
That's like their headquarters.
I remember. I feel like on one of the buildings that they have over on East Hennepin, they painted on there, "This is a blank canvas."
Facts. Hell
So I was
yeah.
like, I remember us reflecting on that as far as like that's how they see the neighborhood as like a blank canvas, and they're selling this whole dream of like you could just come to Northeast and come up. There's this whole world here for you to create. You know, it was offensive.
Literally. And then shit, we got in where we fit in because what role do we play is paint it out. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And God bless, we had some work and we were blessed to have that opportunity, but it didn't really it wasn't being built for us to enjoy really.
Yeah. So tell me more. Like we were walking up. Imagine yourself walking up to the Spyhouse. Like, what memories do you have? What feelings do you have? What do you think about when you think about your experience painting the Broadway and painting the Spyhouse?
Well, that's also I'll say it's different because after the Broadway was fully renovated, I worked for a dude who had the exclusive contract to do all of the work of all the spy houses.
A subcontractor who worked for the
So I did wood finishing with him, and that's when I actually painted at the Spy House on Broadway. I painted at all the spy houses, but I painted the deck and the doors numerous times at the Spy House on Broadway, and I remember feeling really kind of bugged out, to be honest with you.
What was bugging you out about it?
I was painting it, and I'm realizing that I'm like over here like tiptoeing around people and bending over backwards, like getting there at 6 a.m, and then I'm also realizing that the people who are drinking coffee around me are probably getting paid more than me currently right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I watch these motherfuckers chill, and it's like just everyone's cooling and it breeze, and I'm like, I swear this person is at work right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm over here swimming in IRS debt for the work I'm getting paid at the moment. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you realize how there's levels to this shit.
Yeah, seeing like the real class power of gentrification play out as far as like you live in the neighborhood, came from the culture that's kind of being commodified in this new hip Spyhouse Northeast, and you're putting in physical labor, you know, scraping, trying to pay the rent and living in like harsh austerity. And then there's a person that's probably your age, just like well-dressed, sitting with the MacBook, typing away.
Talking about like Northeast is lit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like a lot of times the word gentrification gets thrown around, but it's like trying to break it down to actually like what got us thinking in this way? What were the experiences we had that made us critical in like
I want to say, man, I always feel like it's good to preface, like, there is levels to this shit, and I'm also working, you know what I'm saying? And I'm getting paid, where it's like, there's people who are completely excluded, who are also not even seen in that picture at all, so.
No, definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
What
Yeah.
I recognize is like, I'm one of the motherfuckers on the computer, you know what I'm saying? As far as like, I graduated from college, and I was doing nonprofit work where like, I'd work from a coffee shop, I still do, you know what I'm saying? And I think to even have more nuance in that is like, I'm poor doing that. I am more in debt than what I make, but the conditions of my labor are less exploited than like most of the people we grew up with, or I got it sweeter than a lot of people, or it's in certain ways.
For sure.
And that's a part of the reason why I feel like this is an interesting conversation, is because I'm really excited about and want to lift up and support the organizing that's happening in the breweries, in the coffee shops, in the nonprofits. And I feel like for us, we were talking as we were walking up to the picket as far as like a better class consciousness in terms of its complex. The workers at these spots are not our enemies. The workers are people who are also being exploited. And I'm curious to hear you kind of reflect on those dynamics, or even, when you think about, I heard you reflecting on the difference between labor and approaching gentrification from like a labor organizing perspective as opposed to like a broad community organizing, or any thoughts you have in that.
I'll say a couple things.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, one, I'm like, even though I am a painter and I have that's like a low level craft to get into. So I'm not the most handy person. So I understand that like my employment, I also work in a school right now, but my employment is really precarious, and I could definitely be a barista or a server. You know what I'm saying? At any point,
I've been a barista.
I'm saying like, the fuck, I could definitely be working at a Spyhouse, like, and shit. Also like being raised by a waitress, you know what I'm saying, who had 2 jobs always and was waiting tables. So the service industry is near and dear to me.
Real shit.
100%. But as far as like the dynamic between the workers at Spyhouse, shout out to them in full support. And being somebody who like is like community organizing and being from Northeast, and maybe like my whole life, I guess I've always thought about like, I always wanted to galvanize Northeast for like, you know what I'm saying, to get with the shits, or to like organize in my neighborhood and to build power there. Okay, hold on, let me say something. A lot of people, especially like my peers, don't understand themselves as workers oftentimes, and don't understand, and like our like the way we relate with our employment is so like transient and unattached that like sometimes I think in these times, labor organizing, and for people like us, especially like people without labor organizing seems kind of foreign.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
we're coming out of a period of like severe political repression of the labor movement and class consciousness. I feel like,
sure.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing what you're saying as far as we identify more, it was a class dynamic to our identity as people from Northeast Minneapolis, and all of our community, the people you were painting with, and all of us who were living through this gentrification. But it wasn't expressed in terms of like the labor market or ourselves as workers. It was more like, we're from the city, we're working class people, we're going to represent our neighborhood. The cultural differences between us and what we perceived as the people from the suburbs coming in, the feeling of class exploitation and raise the I'll beat your motherfucking ass, bro. This is our neighborhood type shit. And then realizing that is a form of class consciousness, but when it's only can be expressed in geographic terms or this broad as far as like Northeast Minneapolis, I've been learning more that that's a concept even that you got to go past, because there's class conflicts in Northeast Minneapolis. There's landlords in Northeast Minneapolis. A lot of people who are from Northeast and maybe even grew up with working class family Northeast caked up off the gentrification because they were small landlords and stuff. So it ain't all good like that. We're not all one community. We got to be more conscious of who are our real, who do we really have solidarity with? And there's nothing wrong with having like pride in where you're from, but it could create a real reactionary mindset.
It can.
You know what I'm saying? So I appreciated you pointing that out.
Right. With that, and also it's cool. But you could also organize in places that's not your workplace, in the community, and be in solidarity.
Absolutely.
And everybody wins. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I'm sure these people in Spyhouse who are working there probably fuck around and live there now too. So it's or somewhere around. Everyone is renting somewhere, and we all work somewhere. So it's like.
Yes. And getting past that, like growing up, it was like, again, it's like, there was this, it sounds even silly to talk about, but everybody I'm sure will resonate with it. To us, it was like, man, fuck the suburbs, you suburb ass motherfucker, or whatever. Or who are these people coming in from the suburbs? And that's a fallacy. Working class people live in the suburbs. Poor people live in the suburbs. Poor people live in rural areas. And we got, what you're saying is like, yes, we support all working class people, and our ethic is working class solidarity. And that's what made us proud to be from Northeast Minneapolis, is that we were raised by like hardworking people, and we seen poor people, we seen people come together and struggle, you know, and it's like, so we want good for all people in them circumstances, and we're not taking a reactionary position. It's cool to have new people come to the neighborhood. It's cool to have people travel around. We got to have class solidarity everywhere that we are, you know? For
sure. And I definitely off top fuck with the people working at Spyhouse more than that hoe ass dude who owns it. So
Yes.
that's straight like that. So 100%. So if you do want to exercise some of that anger and rage, just like look at the dude who's profiting off this shit, owns multiple businesses, been in effect for hella years, and it's caked up. Like,
and he's a racist piece of shit in terms of
Right.
like that's the other thing is I've seen some people kind of look sideways at the Spyhouse Workers Union because they have such a negative understanding of the Spyhouse, which I could understand because they've been so racist over the years. They've sent racist instructions to their employees. And what I think is good about this unionizing effort is my understanding is that's a part of the workers standing up against that racism and wanting something different. That's the owner enforcing them boundaries and shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, fuck that dude. Did you paint his actual house?
I did go inside of his house. I'm not trying to. No one probably listen to this who like I don't know. It doesn't matter. Fuck it. Like
No, I was wondering that too.
I wonder, but I was definitely in that dude's house, man, and he has a bunch of figurines and shit, and action figure shit. Way too much fucking money, way too much time, bro. And just with the type of woodwork and fucking shit we was installing in there off top was just extra.
Yeah. And he locked the workers out after the strike is my understanding. And like the idea that you're playing with people's livelihoods like that when you're just sitting back collecting profits from what they do all day, that's despicable. And like you definitely need to recognize the union.
Facts.
Hell yeah. The other thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about us walking up to the picket was to tell the story, document the gentrification of Northeast Minneapolis or the recapitalization. And we talked about them apartment buildings right there in terms of right across the street, basically across the street from Beltrami Park, there's a set of apartments. I can't remember like the name of them right now. But around the same time that the Broadway was developed and you had the Spyhouse come in, you had the 612 Brew come in, you had the little boutiques and shops, and that became like this real estate investment. Those apartments were like completely flipped over. You know what I'm saying? Completely turned over. Those were apartments where like poor people lived, multiracial buildings that were probably mostly people of color, working people, low income apartments, you know, that were flipped and then marketed to renters of a higher income. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that needs to be addressed. And I feel like even for me to go up there and show my solidarity with the striking workers, it's also important to acknowledge those people who were the victims of that development, you know what I'm saying, are still out here, might still live in Northeast Minneapolis, might be out in the suburbs, whatever, but you know, those are the neighbors we grew up with, and that's like a part of this story. And I feel like anytime we're talking about Northeast Minneapolis, we have to like, or that's the purpose of the podcast, I guess.
100%. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
I remember I painted in that building, and I painted for the dudes who own those buildings now. And literally, we was in their house painting, and they were telling us like, it's so funny how people are so unabashed and unashamed about the lives they live that they will tell you how they're living and expect you not to judge them, because he was like talking about how like they just bought these buildings, and when they first bought them, they were afraid to go there. You know what I'm saying? They're looking at us. And some people who are in his house literally grew up 3 blocks from this building. Or he's like saying like, yeah, man, like we bought this shit, but it was like we had to come here and like with a couple people because we were scared. You know, there was crack and drugs and all that stuff. And we're like, bro, what the? I'm over here astonished. Like I cannot believe this dude's over here telling me this shit. But I'm like, that just goes to show you that like it really is like that.
Yeah, and it's important because that's what doesn't get talked about when people talk about the economic vitality and recovery in Northeast. No, it actually was some motherfuckers from elsewhere who hate these people who lived in these apartments, bought that shit out from underneath them, cleared them out, and caked up off it. You know, and it's like that's nothing to be celebrated. That's disgusting.
Straight up.
Hell yeah. Well, shit, I feel like that. You know, we got like 20 minutes of heat. I feel
think
like
we're good. Yeah, we can keep going. But
you got any other thoughts on the matter, like the pickets, the whole conversation? Any other feelings or reflections you had throughout this week?
Another thing that just reminds me is just like everyone got to have a union, especially people who talk about general strike this, general strike that, or whatever. That means we got to really be. Everyone has to bring it to their workplace. Everyone has to bring it to their fucking day to day, or wherever you find yourself. Maybe that was a soapbox.
No, man, this shit.
Nah, but it's straight up though. But it's like,
really,
man, hell yeah, I support anybody trying to get to it, because when you talk about we're all cogs in the system and we all have the power to shut it down, that means you have to get serious about that and identify where you are in it and get organized about it.
Real shit. And it's like, I guess a reflection I've been having the last couple of days too is recognizing like you got to organize in every workplace that you're in. A lot of people don't have a workplace right now.
Yeah, fact.
Even a lot of people who were really like displaced by the gentrification of Northeast. It wasn't even like, it wasn't working class like motherfuckers going to factories.
That's
This was
what
the
I'm saying.
90s.
I
Motherfuckers
don't
didn't
know
have
no one with a
jobs, bro.
union.
Exactly. And the lumpen proletariat, I guess you would call it, you know, and it's like the same collective ethic applies to those people as well. And we're all once been in that position or one step away from being it. So it's like organizing your workplace, organizing your neighborhood, organizing your apartment building. It's another...
And shit, if you're like me, first start off organize your goddamn life first.
I
If that's
swear.
if that's where you got to start, man, I swear to God.
Amen. For real. The interview we got coming up next week, the same dynamic comes up around organizing as tenants. And in terms of like new renters in neighborhoods that are being gentrified, if you approach the situation through your position as a tenant, it opens up more possibilities than the simple gentrified dynamic.
Or
you know?
even employer. Because there's some people without housing, but yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
real
tripping,
shit.
but yeah.
No, I was trying to think of something else I could ask you, but I feel like maybe it's just like
You might have to
that's a
edit
good
some of that shit at the
reflection.
end, 'cause I didn't get it out how I wanted to.
No, it sounded good.
Cool.
Shit. Do I
Money,
got
power,
another-
land, solidarity.
Bang bang.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans about as far